Okay, welcome everyone to the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together to heal our families. And this concept was one born of, people just wanting to know, first of all, about GMOs and glyphosate in the food supply, and having mothers, doctors, and scientists speak to the public, to collaborate with the public, and to have doctors and scientists working together with mothers, hearing what mothers have to say about the well-being of their families instead of being dictated to by doctors, and having the scientists' work not even acknowledged in the most part by the public eye. So collaborating together has just been a wonderful way for the public to hear more about the science behind how our children and family members are, first of all, being harmed and how we're healing them, and then also hearing from doctors and what they're seeing with their patients. And we have our favorite Dr. Michelle Perro with us, a pediatrician. Hello, Dr. Perro. I'm Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America, and we have none other than Dr. Stephanie Seneff with us today. Hi, Dr. Seneff.
Hi.
I call you Stephanie and Michelle, and we have a great show today about the fake food frenzy that is going on. Has everybody seen the USDA has just allowed lab-grown chicken meat? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We're going to show you some images. It is really a very big leap in the food industry for this to happen, of course, without a whole lot of labeling and or explanation going on potentially. But first of all, we want to address, why is this happening? Why is this whole fake food frenzy happening for lab-grown meat, for fake meat, for ways to, we're going to talk about appeal, preserving our foods with methods that could or may not be toxic. We're going to be talking a lot about these things that are on our minds today. And what we have seen is that the motivation, we're going to get right to the crux of it, folks. The motivation for this fake food has, like, the context behind it, the umbrella has been climate change. We need to make this fake food because in the future, we're not going to be able to have as many, cows or chickens or pigs, and we need to have meat that we can, generate inside of a lab because we're not going to have the climate to be able to grow the food to feed these animals. Would you agree, Dr. Seneff and Dr. Michelle, that they're using climate change as a way to gather, funds and research and development funds to make these fake food products? Would you sort of?
Well, they are also claiming that the cows and the pigs and the chickens are increasing the problem that's causing climate change.
Yes,
that's what they're saying. So that's
the main
reason, the main motivator to do this is to thinking that they're going to solve that problem.
Yeah, solve the problem.
Yep, agree. It's a guise. It's a
guise. Thank you, Michelle. Yes, let's unveil the guise. Okay, so we have a video that shows a little bit of history behind this whole green movement and what they started. Like, let's reduce climate change, but let's show that clip.
And now, great moments and unintended consequences. Corn ethanol subsidies. Word got out. Corn ethanol is cheaper, cleaner, renewable, and it will reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Soon after, along came legislation to subsidize it and mandate its consumption. Sounds like a great idea, with the best of intentions. What could possibly go wrong? So many things. Soil erosion, widespread deforestation, rising food prices, rising gas prices, massive water requirements, pollution from fertilizer and pesticides, and the fact that throughout the entire production cycle, ethanol produces more greenhouse gases than regular gasoline. And according to scientists at Cornell University and the University of California, making 1 gallon of corn ethanol requires 1.29 gallons of fossil fuel. All this at a cost of $7 billion a year. Even Al Gore recently admitted the subsidies were a mistake.
So this video shows us how big ag and big industry and our government was trying to solve a problem with genetically modified food. They're saying, we're going to feed the world. We're going to create this green revolution. We're going to have corn, GMO corn, create ethanol, solve this fuel problem, solve this problem of feeding animals. And however, like as Stephanie mentioned earlier, then that solution for this problem ended up becoming another problem, as you saw, which was contributing to what they're now calling climate change, the erosion, the deforestation, the pollution and toxins in the water and in the air. And so now they're blaming this entire GMO corn and factory farming, scenario of confined animal feeding operations with thousands and thousands of cows eating this GMO corn as something that's contributing to the climate changes. And so, of course, they've created more of a problem from this solution, so-called solution. And we have, there's data out there saying that there's this climate gas is producing 40 times more carbon. And we have now, Anne is showing an image of meat, chicken. The lab, US approves chicken made from cultivated cells as a way to sort of circumvent this whole problem of climate change and not being able to feed animals. And this just happened on Monday, it's just been allowed by the USDA. And we've got to talk about this, Dr. Michelle and Dr. Seneff, Stephanie, what is the problem with this lab-grown chicken meat? What are we anticipating could be the issues health-wise and science-wise? Because I'm very concerned as a mother. I just cannot believe that lab-grown chicken meat is going to be as safe or as healthy for my children. Am I right in being dubious about this?
Well, I would like to go into the science of exactly how it works, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's amazing technology, but I think it's very disturbing as far as how far away it is from natural food. And so basically they get these chicken cells from a cell culture, and then they put them in this big vat, and they do this, a bioreactor where they have these chicken cells of muscle cells and fibroblasts that are mixed together in this soup. So it's like a paste. It's not actually a muscle, it's a paste of all these cells. It has to be completely antiseptic and aseptic environment, no microbes, no immune system, no blood vessels, none of that, just this pile of cells growing in this big vat. And they have to use hazmat suits to feed it because they have to be very careful not to expose it to any bacteria or viruses, or else it'll just turn into a big, massive rancid meat mess if it gets exposed to viruses or bacteria. So it's a very costly process. And they have to feed it pharmaceutical grade nutrients rather than food grade. Pharmaceutical grade is even higher quality, which requires a lot more processing, a lot more energy. So they end up using a lot more fuel, electricity than you would use if you were growing meat the normal way. And so these cells are very susceptible to just becoming a mess of goo. And it doesn't look anything like a muscle. So you have to just basically make, chicken nuggets. You can't make any kind of other chicken meat out of it. And it's extremely expensive to make. So it's a very costly form of meat. And, and of course, there's also these growth hormones that they're adding. They have to feed it, these cells grown in culture, they have to feed them fetal, what is it called?
Bovine fetal.
Yeah.
That they slaughter fetal calves to take off the serum. And they're trying to produce these in a lab other ways. But for now, they're taking fetal calves to extract the serum for the medium, which is a expensive, not to mention grotesque way. So they're still killing the cows to get this bovine growth medium to grow this chicken. There's nothing organic, nurturing, or sweet about this technology, but I digress. Why don't you finish up and I can talk about the health ramifications.
But I just want to ask, am I here? So we're using cow growth hormones to grow the chicken cells.
I think so. I think they're using that for all the cells that they grow in culture. They depend upon that.
And I saw in the FDA report, Upside is the main food producer. They couldn't find their report or their study anywhere, but the FDA response to it called it recombinant. When you see the word recombinant, and I Googled the heck out of it, recombinant cell in growth factors, they need these recombinant growth factors. They're genetically engineered growth factors, usually from E. coli, occasionally from yeast. So that's what they're doing. And they're calling it cellular agriculture. They've renamed it to give it an appeal and make it sound farm-like. There's nothing farm-like about it other than the linguistics. That's a linguistics ploy.
So cellular agriculture, really, that's another word for genetically modified, wouldn't it?
Well, when you see recombinant growth factors, you see cellular agriculture. These are all kind of buzzwords. And in the FDA report, you know, and we studied it. We looked at this FDA report on Upside Foods. They're one of the producers of cellular chicken. And it's like, well, wait a minute. The FDA, when they identified 41 potential problems with the cellular agriculture, they said they also need to detect residual unintended material from genetic engineering. So two
Is that
things.
what's in this quote right now? Can you explain what's in this quote?
Yeah, so what happened, the FDA reviewed the proposal by Upsides, and there's a document online, and we give it in our show notes, and they went through, they kind of cleared Upside Foods of all these different things, which we can get into. But at the end of their document, they identified 41 potential issues that could go wrong with this process that Upside Foods, for example, said they would address. But one of them in the very last box said, one of the issues they have to address, Upside Foods, is detection of residual unintended material from genetic engineering. Thus, in admitting you can have unintended material from genetic engineering, and there's genetically engineered products in it. It's not being called a GMO, it's being called a cell culture. They're not using the word GMO. It's totally a GMO or a genetically engineered product. It has, once you have some engineered product in there, it's a GMO by definition.
Well,
I'd like to explain the science on that a little bit more, because what they're doing is they're coming up with this recombinant protein, which is a hormone that actually induces proliferation. So the muscle cells on a cow, they grow very slowly by the time the cow is harvested. They're not multiplying, they're just sitting there and doing their job. Whereas these muscle cells are being encouraged to proliferate every 24 hours, they double in size. So they do that by giving them these hormones that are produced in very exotic ways. And one of the methods, and Michelle had pointed this out to me, it's amazing. They have these fruit flies, and then they insert this DNA into the fruit fly that codes for a hormone that induces growth, a growth hormone. And then they grow these fruit flies. They start with the fruit fly larvae. They inject this DNA, it's recombinant DNA. It's definitely GMO technology. And then they produce these fruit flies, and then they kill them and they extract from them the protein that they've produced. They've been coded to produce large quantities. There's a control element that makes them massively produce this protein, which is a hormone, a growth hormone. And then they extract the growth hormone from the dead fruit flies, and put it into the mix with all the other stuff that's in there growing these muscle cells. So these muscle cells are busy proliferating like crazy, and then they're harvested. Well, so if they're proliferating, that's going to be moving towards cancer. Cancer cells proliferate. So these growth hormones can.
One second, Michelle. I'm sorry, Stephanie, can I just add, that article is on momsacrossamerica.org, GM fruit flies for dinner. We just want to add in that not only are they genetically modifying the fruit flies to have these growth hormones, kind of like if people have seen the cows and the pigs with the giant muscles, it's kind of like that, I would imagine, but they heat them up. Also, they add stress and they heat up the fruit flies to the point of death, so that they generate more, when you're stressed, when your body is stressed, you create more like in a reaction. So it's kind of like spiking the adrenaline in an animal before it dies, right? It's like that. And so they are torturing these fruit flies. It's not like this is some sort of, PETA friendly, not torturing animals in any way. But these are torturing fruit flies. And then, so they crush them up and they extract the growth hormone out of the fruit flies and put it into the lab grown meat. And that lab, as you were saying, is very expensive to run that lab and to grow the meat. And we're talking, dozens of dollars per pound, $25, I don't know, maybe $60 per pound. It's much more expensive than current meat. So this whole movement to me seems like an elitist, really an elitist sort of initiative to create meat that is just an idea, like a concept, like tinkering with toys in order to make something that might seem like a good idea, but is not actually useful for the general public. Is
And,
that,
and not only that, but they didn't add, it's just the GMO story all over again when they introduced GMO crops. Not only did they give it the buzz, the pass, the FDA gave it the pass and not guarding it. There's no regulatory oversight, by the way, of these food companies, but they found that it's not equivalent. The nutrient content is not equivalent. The same thing as the Impossible Burger. They're not equivalent. And they said, we don't see that as a problem. They said, well, gee, there's the recombinant growth factors effect on health. We don't see it as problem. These proliferative cell lines, which may not turn off, that are possibly cancer producing, carcinogenic, the stomach acid should break down those proteins, and we don't see it as a problem. That's what they said about BT corn. And so many people are on antacids, they didn't break down the BT, and it was circulating and in moms and fetuses. So all these things that they're saying are supposed to happen have not been addressed and not been looked at in humans. Health consequences have not been studied. And from this FDA document, it only looks like they looked at 3 cell lines. So they're introducing a product, it's out there, it's on the market with essentially no health ramifications. This is the GMO crop story. They were introduced without all over again, but now it's been ramped up to even higher toxicity, because not only that, as if all that's not enough, heavy metals have been identified as well in the product, and they said the levels are low. Don't worry about it.
oh, but yeah, we know low means high, according to the USDA and the EPA. So I interrupted Stephanie. So you were talking about
Yes.
the ways in which this meat is grown, and that many of them are inhumane. And you were talking about the GM fruit flies. Is there more that we need to know?
No, I think we've pretty much covered what I wanted to say
Yeah.
about that.
Well, me too. And I said the main things they were concerned about, not to mention things like egg allergy. Egg can also be produced in this chicken. It was really, this is sloppy. This is just sloppy, and allowing this organization, Upside Foods, there is like a few more, I think there were 2 more, allowing them to kind of regulate themselves. Not to mention what Stephanie touched on, their lab technique needs to be so pristine. And remember contamination? Well, contamination can happen so easily. Oh, how about like with foreign plasmid DNA? We know of other products that got contaminated with foreign DNA, plasmid DNA, 20-30% of recent, things that came out of the market. We don't have to say the word, but so contamination is a high problem. Not to mention the whole climate change, guys, is a farce, because this process can be 25 times more producing of CO2 than conventionally grown beef.
Yeah,
so
we have an article from Children's Health Defense to show the bloody truth about lab-grown meat. Can we show that, please? Thank you. Yeah, and in this article, it says each kilo of cultured meat produces anywhere from 542 pounds or 246 kilos to 3,325 pounds or 1,508 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions, making the climate impact of cultured meat 4 to 25 times greater than that of conventional beef. So folks, what are we doing here? We're supposed to be creating a solution to this, climate change issue, they claim, and yet they're contributing more to climate change. So how is this getting by? Michelle, you were talking about FDA oversight. Can you talk a little bit more about what is actually happening as far as oversight to these products? Is there any at all?
There was a GMO oversight committee. I think it was disbanded under Obama. Actually, there was a GMO oversight committee, and there's not one now where any company using anything genetically modified. So we have no kind of governmental regulation. And what the FDA is doing, and it's what they did with the Impossible Burger, they said, well, we're not affirming or denying your product. We're letting you be the regulator of your own product. Well, who does that? It's like, that's the fox hen house right there. So the fox is guarding their own hen house, and the FDA literally hands them back the keys, and they're not regulating what's coming out of there. So even though it's why a chicken cell culture is being regulated by the Food and Drug Administration and not by the USDA is an interesting tidbit, but clearly this is not being overseen at all in any sense. So it's a free-for-all because it's new technology, new vats producing these muscle cell lines to grow as chicken nuggets. It's like, really? Is anyone actually going to eat this? It's being produced here in California. People can go look up who's funding it. You know, we don't have to get into the politics of funding. It's always makes our eyebrows go up on who's funding it, but it is a way, it's a patent parade. You patent this stuff, you make a lot of money. You can't patent the chicken in your backyard, but you can sure patent this new technology. So it does become a patent parade with lack of oversight. And I'd say these companies are out of control. It's a genetic engineering free-for-all, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I like that phrase. I mean, I don't like it, but it's a patent parade with lack of oversight. That's exactly what's going on. And I've seen there were articles that came out, actually, for me, my recollection, it was the Trump administration that said the GMO producers can go ahead and regulate themselves. But I know Obama was definitely guilty of not labeling GMOs from the first place. And then Trump said the GMO regulators can go ahead and regulate themselves. And he also said that if during COVID you needed to replace an ingredient that was on the labels, for instance, like say corn oil with soy oil, you could go ahead and do that and not change the label. So we haven't had, really accurate labeling for a very long time. We definitely have not been labeling GMOs. Obama said that they could go ahead and have a QR code or a website or just a phone number on a package to identify whether or not a product was GMO. And the Supreme Court had to actually strike down the QR code business. So that's not allowed to identify whether or not there's GMOs in a product, but they didn't specify how else a manufacturer would do. So now they're saying bioengineered, but it's my understanding that they're not going to say bioengineered on this lab grown chicken. Is that correct? It's not going to be identified in that way.
I haven't seen it, Stephanie. I haven't seen anything, even the word, they have not identified that there are engineered products in here. Neither does the Impossible Burger, and the Impossible Burger is genetically engineered. It's not on there either. Even the Beyond Meat burger, vegetarians, it says, it has monosodium glutamate. Whenever you see those MSG in there, that MSG is often made from genetically engineered yeast. That's a code word for GMO yeast. So we got this message out of people eating whole foods again, right? Getting away from processed foods, eating whole foods, know your farmer. This message, I think, is getting out to public. So what do we do? What does big ag manufacturers start doing? And this would be our next subject. They are tampering with our organics via appeal.
Yes,
Maybe this is a good segue to get into that.
Let's talk about
into our organic produce.
Yeah, let's talk about appeal. I mean, we may come back to lab grown meat if we have some other issues here, but I think we definitely do need to talk about appeal for a moment. Actually, we need to circle back to, can we talk about appeal in a moment? Because we need to circle back. We've got some articles about regenerative agriculture and what the solution is instead of this lab grown meat. Okay, we have, let me see, what is this? The article on environmental impacts of cultured meat. And I think, Stephanie, did you want to talk about that? Was it the environmental impacts of cultured meat? This article?
Oh, I don't know about this article. I don't.
Not this one. Okay, this wasn't you. Okay.
Oh, this is the one this is the UC Davis study. I just had to bring it up. So where Dr. McCullough, who wrote the article for Children's Health Defense about the bloody truth about cell meat, this information came from the environmental impact report from UC Davis. And they're the ones who did this intense study. It's a great study, which showed environmental impacts are so much greater on this cell-cultured cell agriculture than on conventionally grown beef. But this is the report, totally spot on, in-depth analysis. So anybody who says the data is scant out there, not true. Here's the UC Davis report.
Okay, so this was the one where they came up with the 4 to 25 times greater. Okay, the one that Children's Health Defense.
Yeah, that's the research behind that.
Great. It's always great to have the science behind it. I want to make it really clear because I know there's going to be some gentlemen most likely out there watching this episode saying, here's 3 women that are going on about the dangers of, what they're doing in the food supply, and we're emotional, hysterical, and don't know what we're talking about. I just want to make sure that we show that, we have researched for hours for this beforehand, Michelle and Stephanie and myself, so that you don't have to, and we have gone through the science. And some of us have brought, so I may not be aware of some of them that, the other ones brought, but everybody has brought in science and articles and information to this conversation. And I like to be the one to question, because, I'm representing mothers out there that are really wondering what's going on with the food supply. And should we be concerned about this or not? I always want to be open-minded. Maybe this is progress. Maybe this actually is a good thing, but maybe not. So can we take a look at this? So I just want people to know that there's science behind everything that especially Dr. Seneff and Dr. Michelle are saying, and that you can be, really clear that the research has been done here. So there's a massive environmental impact from this lab-grown meat. It is very expensive. It's not looking like a viable solution. What is the solution? Let's talk about regenerative organic farming and how that is actually a viable solution to, to our meat, our desire to eat meat, for most people's desire to eat meat. Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about the role of cattle in regenerative agriculture?
Right.
As
So
a scientist?
the cows grown on the CAFO farms, the confined animal feeding operations, they're not a good example of how to use cows to improve the environment. They're going to go the opposite. They're eating the GMO corn. They're producing lots of methane gas. They're providing toxic manure. There's many things that they're doing that are bad, the CAFO cows, but the cows out on the grass fields are awesome. I think that is actually a solution to climate change rather than a cause. And this is because grasses, many parts of the land areas of the earth are grasslands, naturally grasslands. And those areas are very difficult to grow foods on those types of soil. Those soil types want grass. And grass is actually very effective at improving climate change because it captures carbon and puts it into the soil. And this is something that I think is really critical. And when you put cows on the grass gets healthier. The cows eat the grass, they stimulate its growth, they provide manure, they provide nitrogen with the urine. So they're providing natural fertilizers for the grass. And then by inducing the growth of the grass, they're increasing the uptake of carbon by the grass. And when they're eating grass, they don't produce nearly as much methane, toxic methane that's going to increase the climate change. So when you switch the cows from the CAFO farms to the grasslands, you're making a huge difference to improve the climate change situation with regard to capturing the carbon in the soil by virtue of growing better grass. And of course, the grassland also the soil becomes healthier as well as the grass, and everything is good. So the grass needs the cows. So the natural environment includes animals grazing on grass, and we can't eat grass. So all of the grass that's turned into cow is turning grass into food for us. So it's
and the grass is free. And
the grass is free.
Absorb water, and it creates more micronutrients in the soil, which absorbs more carbon from the air. And so it's a perfect cycle of life that supports more life and nutrients in the soil and in the food, and of course in the animals and in their milk and all of that. But the question is, and we don't have a farmer on the panel right now, but the question has been, of course, do we have enough land to support the movement, because you have to move these animals around. They can't just stay in one spot. Michelle, do you want to talk about this? You have actually talked to a lot of farmers about this, haven't you?
Oh, I have. I've spoke to Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms. I spoke and will be speaking again to Amish farmers, Gabe Brown, Ray Archuleta, Howard Vlieger, Don Huber. These are farmers who are doing it, and they say absolutely. Even here in Marin County, Terra Firma Farms, small farms, they're doing rotational grazing. You rotate and you graze and let the cows move. You don't keep them in one spot. And then the cows turn up the soil. Pigs do it too. They poop in the soil. Cow manure is like gold, chicken manure is like gold, and refertilizing and putting the nutrients back. This is how nature intended. And so when we muck with nature, what Mother Earth, Gaia, intended, this is when we run into problems. The biohacking Mother Nature in terms of the biology of the cow, grass, human interaction has just totally messed it up. So we go back to grazing. There's a podcast of a gentleman in Southern Illinois, Ag Emerge, and you can hear all these podcasts on how farmers can do this. No, I am not a farmer. I'm not rotating the cattle right now, but this is what we understand how to do it. And Gabe Brown, for example, he wrote Dirt to Soil. He was a conventional farmer, became a regenerative farmer, and transformed his own farm. I think he's up in the Dakotas. And so people can read about this. Physicians have written about this, Daphne Miller from UCSF. So people, we are appreciating the fact that eaters and farmers have to link. Right? This is what we're doing. This is what we're educating here. We have to understand farming. Farming has to understand health, moms, nutrition, science. We're all integrated. And that's what we're doing. So yes, mom scientists, pediatricians, we're talking farm science here.
That's great. I just wanted to hear you say that. I know all those farmers myself. I've met many of them. I just want to put a plug out for the movie Common Ground by Josh and Rebecca Tickell that's coming out in the fall in theaters near you. It's going to be amazing. It is the follow-up to Kiss the Ground. If you haven't seen Kiss the Ground, that is available on Netflix and it's been seen by millions of people. Had, I think, 1 billion impressions in the first month. So it's a beautiful film, both Kiss the Ground and Common Ground. Common Ground is even better, I think, and addresses the financial aspect of regenerative organic farming and how it can actually be more profitable, definitely far more profitable than GMO monocrop agriculture, and the whole impact on the planet, of course, is enormous. So I want to, make sure that people keep their eye out for Common Ground in the fall. And if you haven't seen Kiss the Ground, please do see that. It's just a wonderful overview of the food industry. Now, what's happening out in Europe, there's an article by a Scottish farmer that talks about how they are actually killing cows as a way to reduce the methane, emissions in the environment. Can we talk about how crazy this is? Anybody impressions on this? This is just sounds insane to me.
It's just new levels of insanity. It's happening in New Zealand and Scotland. I think that there's some of the worst. It's just unimaginable that they're culling the herds to offset. And this is the poorest usage of livestock, and it's cruel. Where's our humanity? There's nothing good about this. I am not proposing whether if you want to be vegetarian, that's great. And I don't even like calling these animals livestock. They are animals. They should be treated humanely and with the same tender loving care. You are what you eat. You are what you ate. And so they're part of our web. And this to me is just as a human, personally, I take this as a travesty. It's just an inhumane travesty.
Right, 11,540 cows culled in 2022, and this is from the premise that they are producing too much methane. Right, this was not just to kill them to eat them. This was we have to reduce.
Yes, that's the
population
idea.
because of the methane.
I think it's not
emissions.
true. I mean, they're not taking into account how the cows help the grass and how that's important for capturing the carbon. So they're misinterpreting the science, I think, in thinking that these cows are bad. And Scotland has lots and lots of grasslands. It's a perfect place to grow cows. And it's just a shame that they're going to try not to take advantage of that.
So instead, they want to turn to the solution, of course, that they make, which is the Impossible Burger. So we have an article from GMO Science. We want to draw your attention to. Michelle Perro could talk about the Impossible Burger for the next 3 hours. But we just want to make sure that you know about this this information in this article on GMO Science. It is chock full of information about the Impossible Burger. And Michelle, do you want to briefly talk about this article?
Super brief, because I think we've kind of touched on the Impossible Burger, the new MDs in the past. But in essence, what Impossible Foods has done, and through some FDA sleight of hand once again, because the FDA first denied their grant that this food be generally recognized as safe, and then they went back at them. It's also, you can look at the funders on this as well, just saying you can do that on your own time. But they took this soy leg hemoglobin, which is from a soy nodule, which will produce heme, and it's heme, which is an iron compound that makes food taste like meat. It gives it that bloody taste, right? And so they produce that soy from genetically engineered yeast to make the soy hemoglobin. And so when this process, they did produce the product in this soy burger. They first did wheat, now then they switched over to soy. There are 44 novel proteins that were produced. Supposedly, this is a safe burger. Well, hold on. 44 novel proteins, which cause food allergies, lots of food allergies reported in consumers. And GMO for USA was collecting data on hundreds of reports from people. I don't even know how many she has now who suffered allergic reactions from eating the burger.
And getting sick like that day or the day after, right away.
Getting sick.
Mhm.
But additionally, Impossible Foods, the study they did to see if this burger was safe, looked at 20 rats, 10 male, 10 female. And they studied these 20 rats for 28 days. And they found changes in chemistries, reproductive issues, fetal loss. And they had some guy from Nebraska said that these findings are clinically insignificant. According to whom? So they had findings. This is what Monsanto did when they introduced GMOs, by the way, GMO crops. They had findings and they said they were clinically insignificant. So they wrote them off. It's in the original paper, which I read, that the FDA said, you know, we're not going to confirm or deny. You guys have to monitor yourselves. And then Impossible Foods is making Impossible Chicken, Impossible Pork. I don't know what they're making, but it's in the meat section in the freezer in the supermarket. It's in 12 food chains, Whopper, the Impossible Whopper from Burger King, McDonald's, it's all over the place. And like in high-end Michelin star restaurants like Momofuku and others, they're serving.
And our schools. It's the first branded product that has been allowed in our schools, never before, because there's actually like, I don't want to say exactly Papa John's pizza and Taco Bell tacos and, you know, Burger King burgers, but when the sources of those foods are often fast food chains like that. But before, they have never been allowed to be branded like that. Like the kids could be eating a McDonald's burger, but you don't know that because it's not branded in the schools. But the Impossible Foods people, lo and behold, got permission from the entire school system, the federal government, to allow that product to be branded in the school system. So they are marketing to our children and they're feeding them this genetically modified meat that's been modified, 44 proteins that have never before been introduced to the human system, right? And it's generally recognized as safe. That's whole grass thing. It's all just been generally recognized as safe. So it is completely unknown if our children are getting sick from that food that's being served, the Impossible Burger in the grocery store. And I want to point out, there's a lot of negative stuff going towards Beyond Meat, and I understand that, but Beyond Meat is at least non-GMO. Okay, it's not organic, but it's non-GMO. Impossible Burger is GMO. It is genetically modified, the 44 proteins that have never before been introduced to the human body. And so I am much more biased against Impossible Burger, and I've been heavily attacked for that, for our articles. Moms Across America tested, and we found glyphosate in the Impossible Burger 11 times higher than in the Beyond Meat burger. And I believe that's because of the GMO soy ingredients in the Impossible Burger, which are, of course, GMO and sprayed with glyphosate and all of that. So I just want to make that distinction out there. I would much prefer if somebody's going to eat one of those types of burgers that you do Beyond Meat instead of Impossible Burger. Or you can just go to like places like Costco and other places. They have lentil burgers. They have like black bean, lentil, corn, they have burger. And as long as they're organic, they're going to be much better for you than any of these lab grown meat choices. But it has to be organic, folks. If it's not organic, we're going to be talking about high levels of glyphosate, because the ingredients in vegan and vegetarian foods, such as chickpeas and soy and corn, possibly wheat, but and these types of lentils and mung beans and pea proteins, those crops are usually sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent. So you're going to have the highest levels of glyphosate are going to be on vegan and vegetarian foods that have these type of beans and lentils and oats and, type ingredients. So we can't have a show without mentioning glyphosate, right, Stephanie?
That's absolutely right. And thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we have to talk about that.
Lentils and the chickpeas have the highest levels of Canada, looking at all these different food types, found sky high levels of glyphosate in non-organic lentils and chickpeas.
Oh, and Stephanie, the irony is, Zen, is that it is so easy to make a veggie burger from scratch. They take about 20 minutes. By the time you drive over to Costco, because they're usually in suburbs, you drive there and you drive home, you could have made the burger from just some black beans, some onions, some cilantro, some tomatoes, some salt and pepper. You bake it, you put it in the oven, and you're done. And they're delicious.
Yeah, and you can make a whole bunch of them and freeze them and have them so that later you just can reheat them, and it's much faster. Yeah, people forget about the wait time too in restaurants. By the time you go and sit down and wait for the waitress to get to you and get served, I mean, it's practically an hour for that in most cases. And you could have made that whole meal at home for a fraction, an eighth of the price. I mean, I got lunch today, it was $24. Ridiculous. Could have made food for an entire family for that.
And I have to do a shout out to Zen, because Zen actually, because of what you said once, when you went into a school, and I've done it since you told me about it years ago, and they said they couldn't come under budget going organic. And you said not only did you switch the school over to organic, but they came in under budget. So this concept, organic is too expensive. Well, I can tell you making these foods at home versus them prepackaged is more wholesome and healthier, especially if you buy the black beans in bulk. If
Yep,
your beans in
exactly.
bulk are cheap,
Dry black beans.
buy
bulk.
beans, you
All you
soak
have
them
to do is soak
overnight,
them the night.
cook
Yep.
them the next day in your crock pot or on your stove for 2 hours. It's a little more time consuming, but the end product is and is telling us doctors are expensive. Yes, I'm expensive. Um, so yes,
As
do
you
it.
should be. Your time is very valuable. You're doing more research than most doctors out there. So, one other thing that Moms Across America did is we tested for glyphosate in breast milk. And so we need to segue into this new
important new
breast
topic.
milk issue. They are making fake food breast milk. Well, they're saying it's real because it's genetically it's made from mammary biotechnology. It's made from human breast milk, and they're saying that this is going to be safe, and it's cultivated under safe conditions using our first of its kind technology. It's 100% human. I am once again, very dubious, very skeptical that this is really the best thing for babies. I know that maybe some women have trouble and, have issues with breastfeeding. I would really question though the genetic engineering of of breast milk and the safety of this. What do you think about this, Dr. Seneff?
Well, it's the same story as with the other cells grown in culture. You've got these mammary cells that are being grown in this vat, and they have to be kept in an extremely sterile environment. They don't have an immune system. Any kind of microbe is going to wipe them out. It's the same problem. And then they're producing, so they're missing on a lot of things that show up in natural breast milk. For example, all the antibodies that the mother delivers to the child that protects them from disease before the child's immune system has properly developed. That's really important. Those antibodies that they get early in life, they're completely missing from these mammary cells. There's no access to antibodies, and so, and of course, it's a sterile environment. Normally breast milk has microbes in it, and those microbes are going to be very useful to help populate the baby's gut and get the baby off on the right start. So I think the milk that it produces has to be extremely deficient in critical things that are normally provided by breast milk.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems is we don't see any testing, do we, Dr. Pero, on the nutritional values or content of these products. They're not saying, hey, look, it's even more nutrient dense, or it's even more tasty, or whatever. They're not even saying any of that.
No, they didn't. Not only they didn't say the nutrient equivalency, and they have to add a lot of things to get these cells to grow. They're going to have to add some kind of growth factor. And
there you go. There's the cancer.
Growth factor to get these cells to grow. If you put some cells in culture, they need a stimulus to grow. So, and even with the chicken cell agriculture, the nutrient content wasn't the same, and they have to add these synthetic substances to get the cells to grow. We talked about the contaminants, but there's some breast milk is a very complicated formula, and each mom makes it specifically for that baby. There's something called human milk oligosaccharides in breast milk, and that is the food for the microbes. And a mom can have anywhere from 50 to 200 different types of these compounds. They're called oligosaccharides. And as baby nurses, baby's microbiome goes up, mom, and then through retrograde flow, mom produces what the baby needs and it goes back. Now, I understand some moms cannot nurse. They don't have milk. They've got to go back to work. The baby was adopted. If it's a foster care baby, I get it. There are many situations that happen. And this is not a shame and blame game for women who did not nurse. But then to take an experimental cell line and then see what happens when we have no idea about the quality control, contamination, or these genetic engineered byproducts that even the FDA is worried about, we're creating more problems. And even though I'm not a big fan of formula that has to be done, you can buy organic formulas. Formula technology has been studied for a long time.
Well, the other thing is, I just want to interject, we women can help take care of each other. There is a thing called breast milk banks. Since the beginning of time, women have been sorting each other with wet nurses. The other women would breastfeed other women's babies if they could not.
Yeah.
And so, human milk from other humans is a completely viable option. I see on Facebook all the time in my mom's groups, I have too much milk. I see women showing freezer fulls of their milk. They have too much milk. They want to give it away. So just lean on your neighbors and your community. If you have an issue with producing breast milk, there is human breast milk from other people, and that is a
Breast
completely
milk banks,
viable
for
option.
sure.
And
Or
that
you
used to be
can-
something that was quite common,
Yeah.
commonly accepted, having a wet nurse. And then after they introduced the formula in the 1950s, somehow it eventually became kind of like an ick factor that you don't want some other mother to be feeding your child. We have some kind of barrier against it now.
Yeah.
I feel we need to get back to the idea that that's perfectly fine. It's by far the best solution if you can't provide the milk for your child, to let someone else do it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank
I
you so
think
much
it's
for
a better
bringing it up.
solution too. And you can screen the mom for different infections if you were worried about infections, you can. And this would be a shout out to Weston Price, because in Nourishing Traditions that you can make formula if you had to. You can make it yourself.
With goat
If you
milk?
had to. I
Mhm.
mean, it's you got to be careful, but it is doable. But again, if you have to use formula, you must use organic formula. And now they're starting to add probiotics to formulas, and they're adding these human milk oligosaccharides, and they're adding vitamin D, and they're beefing them up to look more like breast milk, but there is nothing like breast milk.
Right.
There,
Well,
it's
we could talk more about this, but we need to move
Yeah.
on. Yeah, we need to move on to appeal, because there is a lot of hoopla out there about this new coating that is being applied to fruits and vegetables, particularly citrus like lemons and limes, to oranges, to apples, to avocados. This appeal product coating has really caused a stir. We have an article from it's actually a YouTube video from OCA. Do we want to show that?
Yeah, it's a great.
Organic Consumers Association. Go ahead. We're not hearing music, but that's okay. So we want to know what's in appeal. We want the manufacturers to expose that. There obviously could be levels of heavy metals and chemicals in appeal that it's allowed. The FDA is allowing certain levels of heavy metals and toxic chemicals in appeal, but we don't know what those levels are. And that's the entire problem, don't we think, ladies, that is going on with the food supply, that they're not letting the consumers know what the levels are, and they are, in the first place, they're not setting safe levels of these toxins in appeal. It's extremely concerning. There are great articles out there. There's one by Valerie Wilson .substack called Perfect Day Appeal, CRISPR Stay Away. I don't think we have an image of that, but I just want to bring that to your attention. Valerie Wilson has done a lot of research on that. It's also on our Moms Across America website, momsacrossamerica.org. And then the Organic Eye petition to have a FDA oversight is another thing that I want to bring to people's attention. Organic Eye has called for the FDA to actually enact oversight on the appeal coating. And there are stores that have decided to not sell appeal. So I think that do we have information on that? Was it Costco? Do we have information on that? Do we have an image about that?
I don't know if we have an image, but thanks to Ann Temple and, emailing Costco, Costco got so much pressure regarding they had agreed to use appeal on their produce. And they got so much consumer pressure that we did receive an email yesterday, thanks to Ann, saying that they are no longer doing it. So to think that we don't have a voice and that consumer pressure, doesn't work. The company is called Stemlet. Thank you. Stemlet. So yes, consumer advocacy, consumer pressures, citizen scientist, this all works. If you're not happy with a product, contact your company, your local grocer, and tell them what your concerns are. The grocers who were using appeal had appeal on the box, but then when they put their organic food out, each one wasn't labeled. So even the grocers didn't know that their own produce had appeal on it. And so you have to understand that this appeal, not only the heavy metals, it produces these fats, one that will eventually lead to triglycerides, which are not exactly healthy, but it also produces another compound, which I had to look up, called monoacylglycerides, and they can cause increased insulin secretion, and they produce a compound called glycidol, which is a carcinogen. So what are we doing? So to protect our fruit and veggies, I mean, it really goes back to trying to buy locally, farmers markets, knowing your farmer, growing your own when possible, and getting away from these synthetic. It's made from grapeseed oil, but they use hexane to extract some fatting coats. And those hexanes are not healthy. So they do the same thing with baby formula.
And hexane is a solvent, isn't it?
It's extremely toxic. I've done some research on hexane. It's terrible, and it's really disturbing to if
So
there's
hexane could
contamination.
hexane could be in appeal because it's used in the process.
Yes, I didn't know that, but that is really scary. That would definitely make me want to avoid it. And I want to also say that, of course, it allows you to eat the fruit later because it still looks good, but the later you eat it, the less nutritional value it has, because these fruits have most of their nutrition. Much of the nutrition is lost over time, so you want to eat the fruit
How
as soon as
how fast is the nutrition lost, Michelle?
3 days, but 30% by 3 days. So you want to eat it fresh as you can. That's the whole idea. But when I went to the company website for this show, looking at this, the company says, no, it maintains the nutritive value. And I don't know. I said, well, you got to show me that data where you can.
Where's the data on that?
A week out of an avocado coated with appeal that it still has its nutritive value. Like avocados go bad once they mature, they're bad within a day. And so I want to see that data. So this idea of, equivalency is not true. Nutritive content gets lost. The coating is toxic. And so this is a no-brainer. You see it, don't eat it. And if you see it, let your grocer know, get rid of it.
Right. Yeah, I just want to name some of the heavy metals again, and ingredients that could be present in it. The video showed it, but it was kind of quick. So in our Moms Across America article by Valerie Wilson, the FDA papers about appeal say that they allow lead, arsenic, cadmium, palladium, mercury, citric acid, which is almost always derived from GMO corn, soap, sodium oleate, which is an extra salt, like it's sodium that's added to your diet. Ethyl acetate, it's a flavoring agent used in solvents, paints, liqueurs, perfumes, and processed foods, which is toxic if it's ingested or inhaled. Heptane, which is used in test fuels, petroleum refinements, cements, and inks. And it contains toluene, a highly toxic chemical with a range of detrimental health effects when inhaled, swallowed, or when it comes in contact with skin or eyes. There are many countries now that are selling this, such as France, UK, Peru, Spain, Sweden, Norway, China, Australia, Poland, Japan, Canada, United States. It cannot be washed off. No information, campaign, or consent was ever done. They just sort of quietly started spraying our food with this toxic substance. It is a creation from Bill Gates, the same person who gave us GMOs. The state laws, they vary from state to state and country from country. And it's made from diglycerides of fatty acids, which means it contains trans fats. And it's heated before putting on the produce. So if you're eating something raw, will your produce really be raw anymore is one of the questions. The produce is also being sanitized before appeal is applied. And we all know how important microbes are for our gut microbiome. So there's a lot of issues with this. It's a liquid spray that turns into like a polymer-like wax or plastic. And so you can find that information on our website. There's this list of stores that are also carrying a peel. You can contact them. And we should definitely, if you want to volunteer for Moms Across America and get all the contact information for these stores, that would be fabulous. We could use your support in being able to do a petition to these stores that are using this product. So that wraps up our time. Do you have any last statements about this fake food frenzy? Michelle, do you want to help close us out with any comments on it, fake food frenzy?
So again, whole foods in the kitchen, family produced, family eats it together, veer away. We don't need food hacks from the lab, from genetic engineers. Food does not need to be produced by genetic engineering. We do very well with what Mother Nature has provided. We know how to hybridize. Hybridization is not genetic engineering, and we can produce really quality foods to feed our families. That would be my final statement on this. Probably not final, but a statement.
Oh yeah, it's not final. Stephanie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that was very good. And just,
Okay.
I think you just really have to do as little processing as you can get by with. Direct farm to table is the answer for healthy food. Stay away from soy protein bars. I mean, anything that's got a huge list of ingredients that look like chemicals, don't buy it. So we just need to stay away from the processed foods, eat the natural foods, eat the whole foods, minimal processing. I think that's a very big step towards a healthy lifestyle.
That's great. And that's coming from somebody who is a scientist and who knows the science and who loves science and still says, we can do this without genetically engineering our food and without creating lab grown meat. Folks, we can do it. We just need to get reconnected with those whole foods, the plant-based foods, the meats that are regenerative, organic, and respect nature and animal life. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ann Temple, for behind the scenes. Thank you to GMO Science and to grow a garden. Ann says, grow your own food and feel the power and the joy that is involved with growing tomatoes and squash and greens, and how delicious and wonderful it is. Your kids will love it. Your wildlife in your area will love it, and you will love it. Thank you so much for being with us again on this episode of the New MDs. Very important episode. Please share it with your friends and family. You want them to know about Appeal. You want them to know about lab-grown meat. And you want to connect with your local farmers, folks, your local regenerative organic farmers, and support local and regenerative organic. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Seneff and Dr. Michelle Perro, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zen.